In this video, I'm going to be going over Chapter 4, Challenge Problem 4.5, called Picking Apart Your User's Input. First thing we'll do is go to replit.com. We're going to click Create in the top left corner and select our language, Python. Leave the title, click Create Python. Now the site is going to get our editor ready. And what I'll do is I will cut and paste the text of the problem directly into my code editor here and just comment it out so that it's easier for me to see. So I'm going to just put a comment marker there, and you can see the whole section is now commented. The first thing, it says to create a script named firstletter.py. Now we could create a new file here called that, but we'll skip that part because it's not relevant. So the first thing we want is to prompt the user for input by asking the string, tell me your password. Then we want to determine the first letter of the user's input, convert that letter to uppercase, and display it back. All right. So the first thing we want to do to capture user input, if you read the chapter, is to use the input function. In order to store that input into a variable, we will first create our variable, and I'll call it password since this is going to be a password, equals, and then use the input function. And then inside the input function, we can put our prompt. So we'll say, tell me your password. Add a little extra space there. Now I always recommend that as you are coding, stop and hit run as often as you can to make sure you don't have any errors. It's easier to fix an error when you've only made one change rather than wait till the end of the program. So in this case, let's hit run. You can see it prompts me as expected, and then nothing happens as expected. So this was the first piece. So prompt the user for input. The next piece is going to be determine the first letter. So we want to store that into a variable. So we will call that variable first letter. And the string we want to get the first letter from is password. Now from the chapter, you should know that to get specific pieces of a string, we use the array index operator, which is the left bracket. So for the first letter, we're going to use 0 because as you read in the chapter, arrays start at 0 in Python. So the first letter in that array, that string, is 0. So before we move on, I'm going to go ahead and hit run again to make sure that there's no errors in this code. In this case, it appears to run just fine. So we'll move on to the next piece. Next part is to convert it to uppercase. So convert to upper. Here we'll create a new variable called first letter upper. And what we'll do is we'll take the first letter and then call upper on it. Again, this is covered in the chapter. So upper will give you the uppercase version of a string. In this case, the string is just one letter long. The last piece is going to be displaying it back. But since I did more work, I'm going to hit run to make sure there's no more errors, or there's no errors. There's no errors coming up over here, so we're fine. So last piece is display back to user. So to print things to the screen, we use the print command. What we want to say is the first letter of your input was. Now we need to put the variable first letter upper into this string. Several ways to do this were covered in the chapter. This is one way, so we can hit plus. And what this does is called concatenation. It'll combine this string with that string. So to see that it worked, we can hit run. In this case, we'll put a bunch of random characters. First letter of input was capital A, so that works. But I do want to cover a better way of combining strings here, and that's called string interpolation. This was covered in the chapter, and the way you do it is you start your string with an F. From there, you can put what you want inside your quotes. But to insert a variable into your string, we use the curly braces. And then inside, we put what we want to appear there. This is the recommended way of putting a string inside a string rather than using the plus command that you saw earlier. So to verify that this works, we're going to hit run. Tell me your password. Put a bunch of stuff in here. The first letter of your input was, and there's a capital F. So it worked as intended. Now, just to show you an error, what it would look like in here, the text said to not worry about what happens if the user doesn't put a value in and just hits enter without entering anything. So if you want, you can pause the video for a moment and just think of what would happen and see if you can guess what kind of error would come up or where the error would be in the program. So to simulate this, what we'll do is just hit run, and I'll just hit enter with nothing in it. So you got some information on your error here. So the last line here says index error, string index out of range. It shows us the line that this occurred on, where we said first letter equals password 0, and it also shows us the line number. So the error happened here. What happened is the index we're using, 0, says give us the first letter of that string. Well, the problem is that string has no letters, so there is no first letter, so therefore the index is out of range. We'll be covering how to handle these types of errors in later chapters, but for now I just wanted you to see what it would look like having the error there. If you have any questions on this program that we did, feel free to email me or start a conversation in Canvas. Thank you.